Hello guys, I'm Nicole and I like to do fashion DIYs, and in today's video I am going to be recreating this little number. So when I first stumbled upon this at the thrift store, I was gravitated to it by the gingham print. I think it's super cute, and then I noticed the embroidery at the bottom and I thought that would make a really cute little mini skirt, and then I realized that this is actually two for the price of one, because there is another shirt stitched inside of this shirt. So I decided that I would try to make a cute little mini skirt and a little top with the matching trim, and the whole thing was $4.50, and I couldn't really complain because this was two tops for not even the price of one. I don't even know. Anyways, so that is what I'm going to be working on for this video. Hopefully it turns out, because obviously I haven't started. And yeah, let's get into the tutorial.
So obviously the first thing I did was separate the two pieces, and I did that by clipping the stitching in the shoulders. Then after buttoning up the shirt again, I separated the front from the back by cutting down each side, around the sleeve and under the collar. So now I have two separate pieces. Next, I had to remove the side darts from the front by seam ripping. I used an existing skirt I owned to map out the shape of the skirt, and used the fabric chalk to trace it out before cutting. When figuring out the placement of the skirt, it was important to be mindful of the buttons towards the waist. You want to make sure you have enough space for a seam allowance, but you also want to make sure it's close enough to the top, so there isn't any gaping. Then I used the front piece to cut out the back piece by laying it flat, pinning both pieces together and cutting around it. So now it's time to attach both the front and the back of the skirt together. I did this by pinning right sides together, and just before the bottom of the skirt, I measured out a 3-inch slit that I finished with a double folded hem, then sewed. So far, the skirt looks something like this. All I needed to do was add another button to the bottom and finish the raw edge. To complete the waist, I did a double folded hem and sewed. And for the button, I removed a button from the remaining scraps of fabric. Once I figured out the placement of the button, I used fabric chalk to mark its place before using my sewing machine to sew the buttonhole. And after stitching on the button, the skirt is complete. Moving on to the shirt, I started by creating a pattern for it. I traced a top with the fit I like onto pattern paper. Using that as a starting point, I started to redraw the pattern for the top I had in mind. I adjusted the neckline and also added thicker straps. Then once my design was done, I added a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Whenever I draw a pattern like this, I only draw out half because I cut it out on the fold. This way I can guarantee both sides are symmetrical. Then I took the front and used it to create the back pattern piece. I basically just had to redraw the neckline, and once that was cut out, the front and the back pieces looked something like this together. So one of the elements I liked about the original top was the trim. It definitely ties the skirt and the top together. In order to save time and energy, I removed the trim from the original top to sew onto the new top. Once I had removed the trim, I cut down the seams to separate the front from the back. Once the pieces were separated, I cut out my pattern pieces. I always try to use the existing hem of the shirt if I can, so I lined up both the bottom of the pattern piece to the bottom of the shirt before pinning and cutting it out, and repeated the same for the other piece. Then it was time to attach the back to the front by sewing right sides together at the side and shoulder seams. So now the final step is to line the raw edges with the trim I removed earlier. Starting with the armholes, I folded the trim around the raw edge and pinned, then sewed, using a straight stitch, being careful to catch all the layers of fabric while sewing. So this is how far I had gotten before running out of trim, before having to make my own. To do that, I used the remaining gingham fabric and cut two 1.5-inch wide strips, also making sure the length was long enough to cover the neckline. Then I folded each piece in half and pressed with an iron, then pressed both sides into the middle to create a clean edge and attached it to the neckline. Once that was all sewn, my little set was complete. Honestly, I loved the way this turned out. It was exactly what I had envisioned, and yes, I made a hair scrunchie with the leftover fabric. Anyways, guys, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below and subscribe for more DIY videos. Bye!